Hello, everyone. How is everyone this morning? Uh, oh boy. Well, today I thought it would be a good idea to talk about the, the worst thing that you know about that happened to a collector, and if there's some way to guard against it, then that would be even better. First of all, let me check the sound and see if the sound is okay. Um, so Hey there, Caesar. How you doing? Sounds perfect. Good. That's important to know. Um, Let me see. I think the kinds of things I was thinking of, like what was the worst watch you ever bought and didn't work, or what was the kind of deal that you made and it didn't work out. But I'm also thinking of like, well, did you ever take a watch in to have it repaired and it came back worse than when it went in, or anything else like that? Hello, Mr. Charm. How are you today? William, good morning. So anything, it can be, I suppose it can be anything. Hi, Graham. That sort of happened to you, and you're uh, this would be some. Let me start off with my worst. I think, in a way, your first your first big goof is one you never forget. Uh, Mine was very strange because I ended up really liking the watch, but there were certain aspects of it I didn't like, especially not being given the whole truth about it. There was a watch on eBay called Elra. I think it was called a Osmier or something or other. It was a beautiful watch, just gorgeous. And back then, they had more than they seem to have now. They had a lot of auctions, and so you'd put up a watch and or anything else, and people would bid on it, and then you'd learn pretty quickly, maybe a few days, maybe a few hours. And so I forgot what the bidding was or what the evaluation of the watch was, but it was brand new. It was 18 karat gold, and like I said, the design was really gorgeous. So I'd read a little about El Raw, and it goes all the way back to Breguet. And in fact, El Raw had the most complicated watch from 1900 until 1989 when Patek Philippe came out with the most complicated watch. So those were the things that I knew about it. I knew that their their watches were done in Besançon, France, and anyway, the gorgeous watches. So I thought, well, I'll put down a bid, and I had just been paid for a little consulting work I had done. And so I thought, well, I'll put that down. It was like $9,000. And the watch was, I think, like in 20,000 or something like that. And I didn't think there'd be a possibility I'd get it, but I just did it anyway. Well, I did get it. Well, the watch showed up, and this great big box, and it was just beautiful, really a beautiful watch. And I thought, well, boy, did I ever get a good watch. And so I asked him about the movement, and of course, the person who sold it, some guy in Seattle, he wasn't sure about it. And so the more I asked around, they said they thought it was a Frederic Piguet of some sort. And I said, "Oh, do you have a picture of it?" This is going to the guys at El Laurent. Now this was, I think, right before El Laurent was bought by Festina, and they were not in good shape. I mean, financially, they weren't in good shape. So they sent me this blurry picture, and I couldn't tell. It could have been anything. I couldn't tell on that at all. Well, eventually, I visited a friend up in Massachusetts who used to be a judge for the Grand Prix. And I figured, well, if anybody would know, he would. So he popped off the back and he looked at it and he gave me that look like you're going to be disappointed in this. Well, it turned out to be an ETA 7001, which is not only it's a good movement, it's hand wound movement, and it's a good movement for a watch about half the size. The watch was 40 millimeters, and here's this little bitty movement, and it was sort of like, wow, I got screwed. Here I paid $9,000 for a watch with this cheap movement, basically. So that was the good thing that came out of that. I've never trusted a watch company since then, ever. There are certain ones I trust, but most of them I don't, because I don't mind watches with ETA movements. In fact, I have some that I really like a lot. What I don't like is not being told about it ahead of time. Because if you're paying for a watch with an ETA movement, you're not paying as much because the ETA movement isn't as much. On the other hand, if you're paying for a movement that was manufactured by the people selling the watch, now you always don't get that good of a movement, because ETA movements, especially sort of the top and COSC movements, are really quite good. Even the elaborate movements are good. But unless I mean, what you're paying for is that the main thing in a watch is the movement. Now, I know that the guilloche and the materials that the watch case is made of and so on and so forth, those things can get pretty expensive too. So anyway, that was my worst experience. And this is one of the reasons you hear me overly much say, find out what the movement is, find out what it is. Okay. So let's see what you've got here. When I got my first job, I started buying cheap watches that never lasted long and couldn't resell. Knowledge is key. That's been my mantra too, Caesar. Invicta, enough said. Huh? If you go to, don't look at the history of Invicta. Just look at what you're getting. Hey, Thomas. How you doing, Tim? ETA is a good movement. Tiny, ugly movement. Actually, like I said, certain ones are really good, and certain ones I like a whole lot. A lot of them were really other movements. For example, the ETA 7750 is really a Valjoux 7750, and the ETA 64. I think what it is 64 something 9. I forgot what it was. The 96 and 97, or 97 and 98, 64 97, 64 98. Those are big. They used to be used in pocket watches. I like them a lot, especially the Dash 1, because they run at 18,000 VPH. But the thing of it is that you've got to know that. You should know that ahead of time. One of the reasons I like the Tissot Heritage Petite Seconde, it's got one of those movements in it. So it's like, I think, like Caesar said, your knowledge is really key to all of this. The more you know, the more you can find some really gems. Hey, Rancher, how you doing, Clyde? I once bought one of those Acme watches before I knew anything. You got an Acme, huh? 6498. That's right, Clyde. That's the one I was thinking of. So those are, I mean, it's not, it's both knowing the movement and sort of a good sense of the price of it. Or now it's been more and more you see Solida, because I don't know what the deal is. It's sort of funny because in a lot of German watches, you still find ETAs. And I wonder if the ban, if you will, or embargo or boycott, whatever they call it, of not selling ETA movements outside of Swatch extends to Germany or not, because they seem to have a lot of ETA movements. They be moving over. The extent to which they start moving into Salida is simply means they can't get them from ETA, I think. I am not against impulse purchases. Yeah. I, it's not a matter of being for or against impulse purchases, Mr. Charm. It's a matter of can we control ourselves? You're right, though. Okay, you're not against them. I have done that a few times, and usually on watches I have had my eyes on before. Okay, that's another thing, too. But impulse purchases on vacation excursions, oh my God, yeah, they're the worst. I went into a shop on one of my early cruises that I went on, and boy, they had more junk in there, and they were selling them for top price. But yeah, that's true. Um, yeah, I think I've had I sort of like I think the more knowledge you have, the more you're able to follow an impulse. Um, Recently, I bought a watch that I lowballed, and they gave it to me. And this was on a Fabergé Alexi, um, white gold, brand new. They wanted six something. The watch had originally been, I think, 15,000 or something in that neighborhood. The MSRP was that, and I I had looked up the movement. The movement wasn't an ETA, but I lowballed it around 45. That was this. Here's the thing: was cut down to almost at half price, and I decided to knock it down some more. And I figured, okay, that's that. I wasn't crazy about the dial and a lot of other things about the watch, but I liked the watch. I mean, it was like white gold Fabergé. I knew Fabergé had used good movements because they had a similar heritage and movements as Larique does, and that's with Agenor. So when I bought it, it was an impulse, very much of an impulse. Wasn't even thinking I'm going to get it. Turned out to be one of my favorite watches to wear, and I have no idea why. It had so many things that I don't like about a watch. It was it had a solid back to it, and I didn't know that much about the movement. I wasn't sure about it. And the more I looked into it, the more I liked the movement. But when I had that impulse, I probably, had I not known that Fabergé is going to have a decent movement in there beyond an ETA or a Salida, I probably wouldn't have made that jump, but I did anyway. But so impulse can really work for you or against you. Okay. My first outing, it worked against me because I didn't know anything. Um, More recently, it worked very much for me. The other thing that happened ever since I got that one and shooting off my big mouth about it, it's gone. It's all of people went and bought it for a great price. And so they were able to get a fantastic watch. And like I said, it is, I don't know why I like it so much, but I do. Hey, Thomas, I traded a Corum Double Eagle in quartz for an automatic in the same watch. The quartz can fail, and where do you find a replacement when Corum no longer manufactured the quartz movements? Yeah, the Corum coin. I know that watch. Those things happen. Yeah, that's something else. Somebody asked me this morning. I think it was they were kidding me about it. They were asking me about the warranty, and I took them seriously. And I thought, well, I don't think about a warranty too much. I probably should think about a warranty more. At least look into it and see what's going on with it. So anyway, it's one of those things. I suppose you don't need a warranty until you need a warranty. I'll put it that way. Some companies like Oh, gee, I got a Louis Vuitton from Govberg, and it was this very colorful one, a great little world timer, and something didn't work with it. I forgot what it was, and so I told Govberg about it. And I said, "Well, send it back, and we'll fix it." And they did, and that was the end of it. I mean, it was like no muss, no fuss, no argument. They took good care of it. Um, I for some other watches, they will service them for you, but the watches I have, like both my FP Journe that I just got back, and earlier my Parmigiani, I sent them to the to the people who do that. Those are pretty expensive. Those I sort of knew ahead of time. Okay, let's see what else you guys have. Hey, Bill, when I purchased my wife's ring, I was offered a deep discount on the watches the jeweler carried. I passed and still regret not taking advantage of this. Yeah, sometimes regrets are something, sort of like I know a lot of people regret not getting an FP Journe before the pandemic, and I regret not getting more of them. But, that's not a mistake. I was sort of retrospectively like, oh boy, if I knew what would happen to the price then that I know now, it's a funny kind of thing. Thomas, let's see. A local jeweler put the battery in correctly, and the quartz movement had to be repaired for $900 by the AD. Oh boy, the Authorized Service Center for Quorum. That was it. I sold it after repair and purchased the other one. I don't know. That was the thing. It's sort of like in the video that I had on Friday yesterday. I talked about the sort of the mythology. I think that we get a lot of, and the mythology is you better buy it from an AD you know and love and trust and so forth. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you have somebody who is trustworthy and is looking out. But let's face it, these guys are businessmen. They're not Mother Teresa taking care of us collectors. All right, you should know that. So that I think is important. And if you look at not so much what the ideal would be, but look at the reality of people who sell watches. Now, there are some who are better than others. I think I mentioned this one before. I was going to get this watch. I made a deal with an AD in Beverly Hills, and I called them back to close the deal. And after we had agreed on, he said, or he called me, I forgot one of the two. And he says, yeah, I'm sorry. One of my regular customers liked that watch. And so I've got to take care of my regular customers. Now, at the time, I didn't feel screwed. One, I hadn't given the guy any money. Yes, we did have an agreement, but he told me the truth. In other words, he didn't come up with some cock and bull story, but said, look, I take care of my regular customers first, and then somebody on the other side of the country. And that made sense to me. That made perfect sense, and I didn't think anything of it. Now, a great good came out of that, because instead of buying that particular watch, which I think was an Octa at the time, I got the Resonance, which is now, I mean, has been one of the joys of my collection. But that is really more of a good AD story. Later on, he called me, couldn't sell a watch to his customer, wanted to sell me the same one. At the time, not knowing what I know now, I should have, mortgaged the dog and the house to get that watch. But at the time, I just bought the Resonance. It's a funny kind of thing, but as far as my own mind is concerned, that goes into my book as here's a dealer you can trust, not as somebody who's changed his mind. Now, there's this other guy who unfortunately is in Connecticut who got a FP Journe for a friend of mine, and he put down $5,000 on it, And then somebody else came in and offered him a lot more. And so he said, "Oh, hey, I'm sorry, somebody, I sold your watch." Well, I mean, that's very different. I mean, when you put $5,000 down on a watch, I mean, that's saying, okay, that's it. The only reason you don't have the watch, it hasn't come in yet. And when it did come in, then you're supposed to send it to the customer, not find out that somebody says, "Hey, I'll give you this much more for it," and then sell it to them and tell the other one to go pound sand. So that person is forever in my book that I would never buy anything from them again. But that happens. Well, here's the funny part about it. The same guy ended up. He's out in California. He met up with. He went to some kind of thing. Probably in San Francisco. I'm not sure. It could be in L.A. There was some kind of event, and he was really upset. So he got a hold of the regional manager, and he got a hold of all of these people. And then he met with F.P. Journe and told him about it. It was like, well, the guy it was funny because at the time it was right before F.P. Journe decided to go all the boutiques and have no more ADs. I mean, they got their own shop. They opened up one, I think, in Hong Kong recently. I think in possibly Singapore. I know they have one in Kyiv of all places. So those are the only places you can get F.P. Journes. By the way, in September, I made an appointment that the interview that I went to, but couldn't videotape or videotape digital video with back, I don't know, earlier this year. I got an appointment. We're gonna have a real video in next month in September, so I'm looking forward to that. Okay, let's see what you got. Simon, good morning. Buying abroad is risky with no proper access to aftercare services like at home. Yeah, that's true, Simon. I agree with that. But I tell you, some of the best deals I've gotten from overseas. So I can't, I have no problem buying watches from Japan, and I've gotten some really good buys from Japan. So I tell you, another person, who's the guy? He calls himself the urban gentry. That guy, he had made some kind of deal with Japan and decided that's a good one to do. It's like let me put it this way: I bought them from Japanese sellers, I think through Chrono24 and eBay. Both places I had great luck with them. But like the Japanese are like anybody else. They have, they probably have a few people there who they would rather not buy watches from themselves. So you have to be careful about making sort of generalized, sort of things. And in the U.S., there's, like I said, the U.S. dealers that I've dealt with, they're as straight and as crooked as anyone else. So we have to find the people, not so much the where they're from. There are some places I probably would hesitate to get from more so than others. So I will admit that. I don't care much about ADs. I'd rather buy watches on secondary market. The prices is right. Right now, there are great deals on Moser and Parmigiani. It might be my cheap Brazilian blood. Hey, listen, man, I must have the same blood. It's not so much being cheap. It's just like, why would anybody pay several $1,000s more when you can pay several $1,000s less? That's all it comes to. I mean, to me, it's a matter of, sheer rationality. Or another way to look at it, instead of paying several $1,000s more, you could pay several $1,000s less that you'll buy another watch with. So there's that too. And a funny thing, I've gotten really good buys from ADs. I haven't dealt with them too much, but one, when I got my Harry Winston, the there was a dealer in New Jersey, an AD for Harry Winston in New Jersey, and after going through this really bad experience, it was a bad experience, but it wasn't one I got screwed on because this is the guy who, and it doesn't reflect on the Dutch either, but this guy happened to be in the Netherlands, and he was, I don't know, I think he just wasn't the sharpest pencil in the box, to tell you the truth. I'm talking because I spent a summer term at the University of Leiden in Holland, and believe me, the Dutch are great people to deal with, but this one guy wasn't. He wasn't. He he had a crummy picture of his watch, but I figured out what it was. I mean, it was just dumb to put up a crummy picture of your watch. In fact, he put up several crummy pictures. And when I contacted him, I said, "Yeah, could you send me one a little bit?" Oh, so he sent me another crummy picture. But and then this is the guy. I said, "Okay, we made a deal." And he said, "Okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to hire a courier, come by my office, pick it up, take it down to the FedEx place, and send it to you." And he said, "And then you pay for it all." He said, "That's a tradition." Like he knew what the tradition was. Sometimes the seller will pay for shipping, sometimes the buyer. It depends on the situation. But that guy was such a bad experience. And this was for Harry Winston. So then I started looking around elsewhere, and I found one I liked much better. And I got a great deal from an AD who the watch had been, he was a Harry Winston AD, and this guy who collected watches. I mean, the guy had $1 million collection, and he had one Harry Winston because his initials were HW, and he got another one, so he didn't need that one, and it had been sitting in the watch case, and so the AD sold it to me for a great price, and it was, so I mean, like you. That's another thing I think to understand. It's sort of like if you're buying a used car, let's say you want a Mercedes, okay, and you go to a lot that's selling Fords, all right, and they have a Mercedes there. They may want to get rid of it at a better price because they're used to dealing with Ford buyers who are looking for that particular brand. Some years ago, we got our daughter a car. It was an Infinity, and it was at a Saab place. The guy had traded in, and we got a great buy on that car. It was good for years too. Same thing with watches. If you can find one that sort of doesn't quite fit what they're used to selling, you can often get a really good price that way. You have to sort of look at it. I mean, like Harry Winston, I don't think ever was and probably never will be like something that people fall all over themselves to get unless it's jewelry, and then that's another story. Okay, let's see what you guys have. Hey, Sad, we love the rancher, Clyde, Mr. Debonair. Oh, yes. Debonair. I bought a watch from a gray in the U.S., which never wound properly. Too risky to send it back, so I had to be stuck with it. Yeah, you can get. I don't know. Some people, like I said, I've gotten great deals from overseas. Haven't been, like I said, here or overseas, doesn't matter. In my early watch collection days, I jumped on a IWC Portofino 8-day when it was just released, paid full retail at boutique. Only a few months later, it can be had for 25% off. No more new releases. Yeah, that I think is a very good one, Mr. Charm. The thing about being the first kid on the block to have something, as soon as you got it in your hands, is a used one, and time passes pretty quickly, and so it's old news before you know it. So I agree. You don't have to get something that's right, the first guy to get something. Some people are though, and that they get their biggest kick out of that for a couple months. Somebody says, "Oh, you got to watch somebody else has." I could care less. What, like, hey, I found one that nobody else liked, and I got a great deal on it. Uh, Japan is great now with the currency exchange. Yeah, something else, Caesar. A lot of times, the Japanese, a lot of times, they don't like these great big dials on watches, like 40, 42. Sometimes you can get a really good buy on some of the larger dials coming from Japan. I have, and I don't know about exchange rate, but you're probably right about that. All I have to look at is a Swiss exchange rate. Hey, Kent, the red flags are always there. Yeah, you got to learn how to see them, right, Kent? Hey, Brian, the old saying, better late than never. Better late, period. Hey, Mr. Berger. Let's see. Hi, watch out. I bought an Omega from an AD at full price and regretted that decision when trying to sell it next year. That $1,000 hit taught me to buy from the secondary market. Yeah, you do that. I mean, I've got, somebody can buy from the primary market. Let's say that some guy goes in, he there's this Rolex that everybody wants, and he wants it too. So he goes into his AD, said, "Look," he said, "there's a premium on that watch. We'll say it's 15,000, but there's a $3,000 premium. I can get it for you for 18,000." So the guy said, "Oh boy, okay, I'll do it." So he gets it now, and then now remember, this is a $15,000 watch. So next year, a couple of years, he just said, "Well, I want to sell it, so I know it'll keep its retail value." So he ends up selling it for, let's say, 14,000, which isn't a bad hit on a $15,000 watch. But he really paid 18 because he paid the premium on top of that. And so it's sort of like one of those things, not to mention taxes and everything else that you never get back, or VAT and some things like that. So you got to be careful about that. Okay, it's frying pan time. That means I got to split, guys. Let me take a look at these. Uh, what else you got? Oh, I got the frying pan. Yeah. Okay, Burger. One last thing. I've had nothing but positive experiences. 16 watches later from exquisite timepieces, Naples, Florida. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think I got one from them, and it was, like you said, it was a good experience. I think that was the one. Anyway, guys, um, let's talk about something. Let's talk about the best watch deal this afternoon, okay? Let's do that. This morning we had the worst. Let's talk about the best watch deal we ever got. We'll do that this afternoon, okay, at 4:00 New York time. Hope you can make it. Thank you for getting up. Especially if you're on the west coast of if you're in California, on the west coast of the U.S. And anyway, take care.